So guys, I'm an artist. I'm struggling, yes, to sell some of my artwork, but I know I'm going to have a major breakthrough. So today's story is about my insane mother-in-law. She says that my job is not a real job, it's a hobby. Well, I'm trying to prove to her no. This is a passion, and a passion can be turned into a career. Well guys, long story short, she hates me. Let me fill you in on some more details. I'm so grateful for throwaway accounts. That way this can't be connected back to me. Not that I would mind because I personally feel that I did the right thing, but I would love to hear your opinion and comments on the matter. It's a long read, but I swear it's worth it. Let me give some context so that you guys can understand. I'm 30, female, and I have been painting all sorts of art since I was a teenager. Arts and paintings have always been my passion. It's always allowed me to be free and creative, and I even met my husband George at an art show. This is where our love story began. He's always confided in me about the fact that he's always wanted to be a writer, but unfortunately his parents look down on such careers. How I wish I'd known about that before falling in love with him. You see, I decided that as my career I wanted to be an artist and sell my art all over the world, but it's been an extreme struggle. I only make a couple of sales, and it can't even take me months to sell one piece of art. So my husband is the breadwinner, and he's the one who handles our expenses, and has never bothered him until my mother-in-law started bringing it up a lot. My in-laws, Sophie and Richard, have never liked me or approved of me, and it's all because of my profession. Sophie and Richard have a very successful family business where all the children work. They once tried to offer me a job when me and George had just begun dating, but I turned it down, and I feel that my rejecting their offer made them dislike me even more. My brother-in-law, Alan, also not the biggest fan of his wife, Lauren. The only person who likes me from my husband's family is his twin sister, Christy. She's also an artist, but decided that painting would just be a hobby and not a career. Anyways, it was a rainy, cold day, and I was in my art studio busy working on a piece of art when my husband walked in. He was holding his phone by his ear, and I looked over at him and asked him what, did he want, because I was a bit busy. He told me that his mother wants to speak with me. I gasped in shock because his mother never wanted to talk to me unless it was to insult my career. So, he gave me the phone and I greeted my mother-in-law. She greeted me back and asked how I was doing. Well, I told her I'm doing well, and as I was about to ask her how she was doing, she proceeded to ask me if I was available this Saturday. So I told her that I'm free, and then she asked me if we could go out for lunch on Saturday. I was shocked and in total disbelief. My mother-in-law was asking to go out and have lunch with me? So I agreed to go to the lunch date and gave the phone back to George. He left the room to continue talking to Sophie while I started thinking about my upcoming lunch date. I wonder what made my mother-in-law decide to want to go out and have lunch with me. After finishing up with my painting, I went downstairs to start preparing dinner. George came into the kitchen and asked if I was excited about having lunch with Sophie. So I told him that I was curious, and he asked me why I was feeling that way. I then reminded him that his mother had never liked me. He told me to stop exaggerating and that maybe his mother's turning a new leaf. I shrugged my shoulders and told him, well, I guess we'll see. The week went by fast, and soon it was Saturday. I met my mother-in-law at the restaurant she suggested, and obviously it was unnecessarily expensive. George's family loves eating at these overpriced establishments. Anyways, I found her already seated and noticed that she had ordered a bottle of red wine. I greeted her, and she greeted me back with a huge smile on her face. I sat down and started going through the menu, and she then told me to order whatever I wanted because everything was on her. I don't know if she was saying that genuinely or she was being condescending, but I had already told myself that I was going to have this lunch and be open-minded. The waiter came and poured us both a glass of wine. Sophie took a sip of her wine and smiled at me. She then proceeded to tell me that she wants to apologize for all the times that she put me down. She also apologized for all the times that she's been disrespectful towards me. I was taken back because my mother-in-law has never apologized to me ever, and she isn't known to actually apologize to anyone. So I was grateful that she was apologizing to me. I told her that I really appreciate her apologizing, and she then told me that she wanted us to start over on a new page and that she wanted us to work on our relationship. I took a huge gulp from my glass of wine and asked what made her have a change of heart about me. She first hesitated, but then proceeded to say that she judged me without even getting to know me. And that was wrong of her because who was she to judge me? I was surprised by what she was saying because it seemed like she actually had given it some thought. Would make me believe that she was really being genuine. So I told her I appreciate everything that was said and that I would love for us to work on our relationship. She smiled at me and told me that this would definitely make my husband happy. So I nodded my head in agreement with her, and she then proceeded to ask me about my work, and also asked if she could come to view my art one day. I could not believe that the woman in front of me was my mother-in-law. She has always claimed to hate art and artists, so her asking me questions about my work, it really touched my heart because she really didn't have to do this. We spent the whole afternoon at the restaurant, and I genuinely had a good time. When I got home, I told my husband all about it, and he was happy that me and his mother had agreed to work on a relationship. I won't even lie, I was actually starting to see my mother-in-law in a different light. Update number 1. A few weeks have passed since my lunch date with my mother-in-law, and things have really been looking up. We finally had each other's contact numbers, and she would text me every day. My sister-in-law, Christy, had decided to pass by our place for a catch-up session since it's been a while since I'd last seen her. I was hardly around my husband's family, especially if my mother-in-law was there, but since she and I were getting along, maybe all of that would change. Me and Christy were sitting in my studio, and she asked me how I had been doing, and I told her that I was doing great. She then asked me if I had sold any art, and I shook my head sadly. She told me not to lose hope and to continue painting, so I told her that I would never lose hope or give up on my passion for art, even though things have been really tough because I've not sold anything in the last 2 months, but I was not letting that get to me. I then told her about the lunch that I had with her mother. She looked at me with a shocked facial expression and told me to stop joking. I told her I was being serious and even showed her the text messages my mother-in-law had been sending. She shook her head in disbelief, and I told her that I was skeptical and suspicious at first, but it really seems like Sophie is being genuine. She proceeds to tell me that her mother does not have a genuine bone in her body, and that her mother always had ulterior motives. I asked her to not be so negative, just to give my mother-in-law the benefit of the doubt. She raised an eyebrow and reminded me that this was the same woman who likes calling me a child doodler and always tells me to get a real job. I paused for a second because those are the things that my mother-in-law has said to me. I took a deep breath and I told Christy that all those things were in the past. I then told her that I genuinely wanted to give Sophie a chance just to see where things would end up. Christy sighed and told me to tread careful. You know, her mother is, well, unpredictable. I told her not to worry. But I honestly wish that I listened to her because obviously she knew her mother best. It's been a few days since my catch-up session with Christy and I was busy cooking dinner when I received a call from my mother-in-law. I answered my phone and greeted her. She greeted me back and I could hear the joy in her voice. Sophie has never called me and this was actually the first time. She told me that she was calling just because she wanted to personally invite me to the annual family reunion. I tried my best to hold back my excitement and joy. I'd never been able to go to their family reunions because I've never felt welcomed. It was enough that I would get maltreated and, well, insulted at dinner and other small family events. It's not like I never wanted to attend the family reunions because George would always tell me how fun they are. I just did not attend to protect my peace of mind and self-esteem. I told Sophie that I would love to come to the family reunion. She told me that she could not wait to see me and that she was sure that the family would be very happy to see me, since the last time they seen me was at George's wedding. She told me all the details of the party and asked me to pass on the invite to George. She also told me that she would text me the details just in case I forgot anything, and I thanked her and then we ended the call. This was going to be really exciting. I've never had a real family dynamic. I've been raised by my grandmother, who unfortunately passed away in my early 20s. My mother was a drug addict who did not care about me at all and only remembered my existence when she needed some money. And I didn't know anything about my father, so I've always been a bit envious of how close George and his family were. Even though he would complain about how uptight and snobbish they were, I would always tell him to be grateful that at least he had both of his parents and that he also had siblings because some people, for example, me, don't have anybody at all. Update number 2. It was finally the day of the family reunion. It was being held at a fancy venue, and we've been instructed to wear evening formal wear. You see, George had bought me a beautiful sapphire blue dress, which looks stunning. We arrived at the venue, and it was already packed with George's family members. We went around, greeted everyone, and I noticed that some of the family members were giving me the side eye. I didn't care. I kept reminding myself that I've been personally invited. Well, we then finally went over to greet my in-laws, and I greeted everyone, and they all greeted me back, except for my mother-in-law, who just rolled her eyes at me. Well, I greeted her again, and she ignored me. George whispered to me that maybe his mother was in a bad mood, and I then told him that even if she was in a bad mood, she should still greet him because those were basic manners. Sophie proceeded to laugh out loud and asked me what a lowlife like me knew about basic manners. I looked at her in shock and asked her what she was doing. She gave me an icy look and told me to bother someone else and to leave her alone. I decided to walk away because I knew that if I continued entertaining her weird, offish behavior, I would lose my temper. As the evening continued, I was standing next to George while he was talking to a few of his cousins, who obviously had very successful careers. One of his cousins asked me about my career, and as I was about to respond, Sophie interrupted the conversation. Sophie answered her nephew's question by telling him that I was struggling child doodler with no real job. As I was about to tell her off, I noticed that she was arm in arm with a beautiful young lady. I then noticed that Christy was trying to pull me away. I asked Christy who was that lady arm in arm with Sophie, and Christy was about to respond. My mother-in-law proceeded to ask George's cousin if they remember George's successful attorney ex. I was gobsmacked. What was George's ex doing here? I saw how happy my mother-in-law was, and she proceeded to say that clearly George made a mistake because his ex-girlfriend was one of the top attorneys at her law firm, and she was, close to making a partner. George's cousins all looked impressed, and George was just standing looking at his feet. She then continued to say that George really messed up with Laura, his ex, and instead married a useless, struggling artist like me. Christy told my mother-in-law to stop it, but she did not listen. She continued to say that my work was childish doodles, and that she had been nagging George to make, me get a real job so that I could finally just put in my weight and stop leeching off of him and the family. I could feel tears in my eyes, and this was really embarrassing because everyone was now looking at us and listening. Christy was the one trying to defend me while George just stood there. His ex-girlfriend kept looking at me and had this stupid smirk on her face, which I wish I could have slapped. My mother-in-law kept on insulting my art and profession in front of everyone. So I asked her why she was doing this because I thought that we had agreed to start over and work on our relationship. She laughed in my face and told me that she was just pretending so that she could convince me to come to the family reunion, and my heart sank as she uttered those words to me. So this was all part of her little plan to embarrass me in front of the family and George's ex. Wow, this woman is the true definition of evil. After my mother-in-law made it clear that she had no real intentions of trying to work on our relationship, I ran out of the venue, tears running down my face. I could not even sit and cry in the car because George had the keys. Christy came running up to me. She hugged me immediately and just told me that she was sorry for what happened. I couldn't even speak, and I just continued to break down. I eventually calmed down, and Christy offered to take me home. I asked her where my husband was. She looked down at the ground. I repeated the question one more time and told her to tell me the damn truth. She told me that George was still inside and talking to his ex and my mother-in-law. Anger, betrayal, immediately filled me up, and I promised myself that I would never allow my mother-in-law to embarrass me like that again. She was going to pay for this. She insulted my art. My art? And worst of all, she invited my husband's ex. She was definitely going to pay for this. Update number 3. Hey guys, a few weeks have passed since that awful evening, and I decided that I would not confront my mother-in-law or George. Instead, I decided to direct all my energy to an international art competition that I entered. I worked on the art piece for the competition day and night. I haven't spoken to my mother-in-law since that night, and she hasn't texted or called me at all. George did not even try to explain or apologize to me. He just continued to act like nothing happened, which made me even more mad. The only person who's been checking up on me's Christy, and I was grateful for that. I'd finally submitted my art piece for the competition. I had not told anyone, even Christy, that I entered this competition just in case I didn't win. Well, it's been 2 weeks since my submission, and while I was busy cleaning up my art studio, I received a call from an unknown number. At first, I thought maybe it's my mother-in-law, but once I answered, I discovered that it was not. Instead, I've received the biggest, greatest news of my life. I won. They told me that I'd have to come get the office and collect my prize, which was, $10,000 and a 1-year contract to work for their company. I screamed with excitement and cried tears of joy. I knew that my grandmother was looking down at me, probably proud. She'd always encouraged me to follow my dreams, and she had my biggest supporter. She was the reason why I've never given up my dream of being an artist. The following day, I went to the office and collected my prize money, which I immediately deposited into my account. They told me I'd start working for them within the next 6 months, which made me happy. They also told me that they would be doing a magazine spread on me and my artwork, meaning that my name would finally be out there. Things were finally coming together, and I could finally get my revenge on my mother-in-law. Well, I got home and found George already home. He looked stressed to the max and frustrated, and I told him that I'd be hosting a dinner next week, and I'd appreciate if he invited his family over. He rolled his eyes at me and told me that I should be looking for a real job instead of hosting these dinners with his money. That comment stung a bit, but I told myself that I would not let it get to me. I told him, with a big old smile upon my face, that I would not be using his money and that I would be paying for everything myself. He looked at me confused and asked me where did I get the money. I chuckled, told him don't you worry about that. Just invite your family and a few of your colleagues. He told me that he would not invite his colleagues to a low-class dinner. I rolled my eyes and told him that it would be an excellent, fancy dinner at a restaurant. Well, he eventually stopped asking me questions and continued watching TV. I then started planning the dinner. I booked one of the best restaurants in town. I mean, it was very fancy. Also expensive, but hey, I can afford it. Once I booked and sorted everything out, I gave my husband the details and he looked at me in shock. He asked me how could I possibly afford such a restaurant, and then asked me if I've stolen his card. I rolled my little eyes and told him that I had not done such. I was actually offended that he would think such, like I would steal money from him, but then again, he's probably listening to all the awful things that his mother was saying. A few days passed, and I decided to go dress shopping with Christy. She was so shocked to find out that I've chosen one of the most delicate, expensive boutiques in town. While I was trying on dresses, she could not help but ask if her brother was okay with me spending so much money. I just smiled at her and told her that everything would be revealed soon enough. She raised her eyebrows at me and asked me what I meant by that. I just ignored her and continued searching for the dress. Eventually, I found one, and it was absolutely stunning. I could not wait for everyone to see me in it. So, the day of the dinner finally arrived, and I was super excited. I told George that he would find me by the venue. He kept looking at me suspiciously and told me that this dinner better be real because my mother-in-law had invited board members from the company to attend the dinner. Well, I was pretty sure my mother-in-law had invited them so she could embarrass me, but she would not be getting that satisfaction. So, I arrived at the venue dressed in my expensive, stunning dress, and all eyes were on me, especially my mother-in-law's eyes. I started by greeting everyone, and they were shocked by my appearance. I finally got to my in-laws, and I greeted them with a smile. Sophie immediately starts accusing me of stealing money from her dear son. I just looked at her and smirked, and I calmly told her that I've never stolen anything, especially her money. I also told her that she could check his bank account if she desired. My sister-in-law Laura, who's married to my husband's older brother Alan, gave me a funny look before asking me, how could I afford such an expensive dress? I smiled and told her that everyone's question would be answered soon enough. I had asked the restaurant if they could put up a few of my paintings, and they did. But the paintings that had won me the competition was set up in its own little exhibit. You see, my mother-in-law kept on making these ugly comments about my work, and I would just chuckle at every single one. It seemed to bother her that I wasn't upset. Soon it was time for the dinner. While everyone was comfortably seated, I announced that everybody could order whatever they wanted. Everything is on me. I also added that they should feel free and not worry about the bill. My mother-in-law starts hysterically laughing. She then proceeds to say that there's no way in hell I could afford all this. I looked at her. I politely asked her, "Please don't interrupt me while I'm talking." Well, she was stunned and shocked by my response, and everybody ordered, and the evening ran smooth. All of a sudden, my husband's ex-girlfriend walks in. Everybody immediately starts talking. Christy looked over toward me, and I flashed her a smile because I knew this was my mother-in-law's doing. I greeted her, and she snubbed me. I asked her what she was doing here, and she confidently told me that my mother-in-law had invited her, and I nodded my head and told her, "Okay, you go ahead. Have a seat, anywhere you like." After everybody's eaten, I told them that I had an announcement to make. My mother-in-law made a snarky comment and asked if the announcement involved me finally getting a real job. I laughed at that silly little comment and told her that it's even better than that, which she should shut her up. I announced that the painting, which had its own small exhibit, had won a popular international competition, and everybody was shocked. I continued and told them that I would be featured in a magazine spread and had been offered a contract to work there for a year. I then proceeded to announce that I've won a lot of money, and as a gift to my loving, supportive family, I would be taking them on an all-expense-paid vacation to Italy, Milan. Christy and Lauren jumped up in excitement, and my mother-in-law, glared at Lauren, and she immediately sat down. Yes, I'm aware this dinner and vacation will use up my entire winnings from the competition, but they don't have to know that. I'll earn more through the company with the year that I'll be with them. Well, I then added that unfortunately my mother-in-law would not be joining us because she's told me countless times that she hates art and that only stupid people enjoy it. The board members from her company looked at her with a disappointed facial expression, which clearly indicated that they were fans of art. I finally was embarrassing her, and she looked very, very uncomfy. After my announcement, everybody came to congratulate me, even the board members. One of them even asked if they could come and view my art to see if they could find something they liked. My mother-in-law grabbed me and pulled me to the side. She gave me this icy, evil look, and I could tell that she was fuming. She asked me what the hell was I thinking, embarrassing her like that, and she told me that I was, certain word. I laughed at her and told her that now she knows exactly how I feel when she embarrasses me. She told me that the money that I had would run out and I would go back to being the ugly, useless artist I was, and I continued laughing and told her that I have a year contract with the company, and if you think this round of money was all I was going to get, you must have lost your marbles. I'm going to be a filthy, rich artist. She gasped in shock once I mentioned that, and to add salt to her wounds, I told her that I've made a large donation to one of her favorite charities. She looked at me in shock and told her that because of my large, generous donation, the charity's board member had asked me to be a board member as well. So now we're both board members of the charity, meaning that we would be seeing each other a lot. George's ex walked up to ask my mother-in-law what the hell's going on. She thought the whole plan was to embarrass me to the point where George would end up leaving. So that was her motive and plan, and she wanted George to divorce so that he could get back together with his ex. My mother-in-law told George's ex to shut up and just leave. You would think that she would simply have done that. Instead, she starts insulting my mother-in-law, calling her all sorts of names, and they ended up getting into a heated argument. George ran to me and told me to call the security, so I just stared at him and continued to watch my mother-in-law make a fool of herself. Eventually, somebody called security and my mother-in-law was asked to leave. Instead of leaving, she starts pointing her fingers at me and told me this was all my fault and that she hates me. She called me all sorts of names, and as they escorted her out, even though her getting escorted by security in front of her board members wasn't part of her plan, I was glad that it happened because she embarrassed herself even more, and that's exactly what I wanted. The night ended with everybody congratulating me and George's family, telling me how thankful they were for me doing this for them and that they were super excited. Even George's father was excited. Nobody cared that Sophie wasn't going to be there, which made me so happy. So today's mother-in-law might be one of the more toxic ones that we've talked about in the past. Yeah, it just seems like everything that OP was trying to do, the mother-in-law had something to say about it. I mean, first of all, why would you hate someone so much based on the passion that they have? You don't make fun of someone for their job, especially when it's their passion. Anyways, I want to know your thoughts about today's story. I want to know if you were in OP's shoes. How would you go about handling this insane mother-in-law? Make sure you drop your comments down below in our comment section. And I do want to thank you for joining me on today's video. My name's Mr. Reddito, and I narrate stories like this every day. So if you want to be a part of these daily stories, all you have to do is subscribe. Thank you once again. I'll see you tomorrow. But do remember one thing for me, it's cool to be kind. Peace.